planet. Gross domestic product is an indicator that measures the size and growth of national economies. Growth is also a political goal. It is considered to create well-being and even to promote environmental sustainability. Despite continued economic growth, the accumulation of wealth falls in the hands of a limited few. The extraction of raw resources in the pursuit of economic growth has driven ecosystems to the brink of destruction. GDP does not measure these and other impacts on ecological sustainability. Now we need indicators that are capable of navigating economies to function within the boundaries set by planet Earth. For example, circular economies can be measured by looking at the amount of recycled nutrients in farming or the amount of reused materials in industry. Economies circulating with fewer natural resources should not detract from the well-being of the people or threaten equality. Even today, many growth economies lose profits by excluding women from the workforce or through corruption, which deteriorates public trust. Capital should be directed towards actions that nurture the common good and protect human rights. We have ample capital in our economies, but without proper indicators for corporate responsibility, feasible targets for investments cannot be pinpointed. All in all, we should measure the things that matter to us. If we are interested in promoting well-being within the planetary boundaries, wouldn't it be the right time to act accordingly?
Good morning, everyone. Great to see you all here after quite a productive yesterday. My understanding is that the teams have been working hard, and happily we are like halfway of that work, so there is some time today also to continue that fruitful discussion. Yesterday evening there was this reception at Helsinki, city of Helsinki, and I think city's example is one of those that we are like there's this feeling that they are doing some quite interesting things, and then at the same time with SDGs especially, and at the same time we all know that they are quite far from where they should be. So this question of like how to recognize the good steps taken and how to at the same time highlight the vision that is quite far away also became quite concrete yesterday. Just to remind you that in social media we have the hashtag Beyond Growth. There was actually very, very lively discussion yesterday, so let's continue with that because that makes the message to go also out from this room. Now we have an opportunity to listen again for some 20 or 30 minutes. We have a very, very interesting example from Scotland, which is of course one of those areas and places where whole beyond growth thinking has been taken, I would say, quite many steps further compared to many other areas. So I'm happy to invite here Doreen Grow, who is Head of Open Government at Scottish Government and also Chair of Wellbeing Economy Alliance in Scotland, which is a network supporting systems change to ensure that the economy works for people and planet. Quite a work to do. Warm welcome, Doreen Grow.
Thank you, and thank the organisers for inviting me. I want to start explaining a little bit about who I am, just so that I don't raise your expectations that I know very much about this. I'm an archaeologist and historian, and I have been an archaeologist and historian for almost all of my career. 5 years ago, I moved into government at a point when Scotland was designing its own country. We had an independence referendum, and it seemed like an incredibly interesting time for an archaeologist who'd spent, that is me on the right, in the ditch of one of the very best of Scottish castles. If you haven't been to see our castles, get on a plane tomorrow. They are very wonderful. Sorry? Train, I beg your pardon, get on a train tomorrow. I would prefer you get on a boat, actually, really. I mean, you'd have a long swim if you were just going by train. Sorry, but the point of saying that is that I come at these questions with quite a long perspective. And I do that very deliberately because it feels to me as if we have to keep our eye on the bigger picture. Always. It isn't any good just thinking of half a dozen indicators that you tell somebody to deliver and they go on in a silo and think about that's their task. This is a task that we have all to be involved in, which is why I'm not only working in government, but I'm also working with We All to try and find the ways that we can all come together to try and help deliver genuine transformation in the way we work. I'm interested in how we see ourselves and how we tell our own story and what it is we use as information to tell our story. These are two cartoons that we use quite a lot in We All in particular. The first one, for those who can't read it, says, yes, the economy has never been healthier. And the lady is replying, and the drugs needed to cope with it have never been more affordable. That feels to me as if it sums up so much of the world. The other picture is my personal bête noire, the idea that if we were all just a bit more positive, just a bit more certain and forward-looking, it would all be all right. It's not our fault that things are wrong. It's bollocks. Technical term in Scotland. So what I want to do is take you a little bit through our history. We have we got our own parliament 20 years ago now, and in that time we adopted the new public management that Whitehall gave us. We imposed targets and sanctions and inspections. We realized that wasn't really working. We moved into quality improvement and thinking about how we work with partners to improve outcomes for our people. We are now moving towards mobilizing social action and empowering both communities, but also empowering public servants. So we were trying to keep power, sharing power, and in theory, handing power over. I don't think power is a zero-sum game, but I do think that power is the big issue. We continue to have turkeys that won't vote for Christmas in most elite settings. Two other really important things that we've done in Scotland. One is set a series of principles for democratic renewal, and they are largely about making sure that people are properly involved in decision-making, that they are able to influence them, that they are proportionate, that arrangements are appropriate. So not doing this in a way that is irresponsible. Government will remain responsible, but recognizing that government is not alone. It cannot do things alone. The other really, really big piece of work we did post the financial crash was we appointed ahead of the Scottish TUC Trade Union Congress, to look at the reform of public service. So since 2011, we have been on a reform program that looks at the pillars of reform, 4 of them, looking after our people, both our workforce and the population in Scotland. And I try to use the word people rather than citizen, because we have a lot of people in Scotland who aren't citizens necessarily. partnership, and that is partnership with local authorities, with our health service organisations, our civil society organisations, and our voluntary sector, as well as trying to get much closer to people. We look at performance, and I'm going to come to performance, obviously, in this setting. But the thing that underpins all of this is the idea of prevention. Preventing harm, starting at the premise that you will stop harm rather than treat the symptoms of harm. That is really difficult in a world where the media in particular, but we all live in a place where it is very much easier to count the number of ambulances at the bottom of a cliff than the number of people who haven't fallen off the top. So if you have prevented people falling off, that is very difficult to assimilate. So prevention is not easy. That all sums up into what we very grandly call the Scottish approach. But it's basically seeking to work in a much more holistic way, trying to get rid of silos, trying to be place-based, making sure we see our population as an asset, not a problem. Making the person at the centre of what we do. That is incredibly difficult for governments. Make no mistake, I'm not standing up here telling you we have all the answers in Scotland. It really is difficult. We know that. We publish it in every document, but it's blooming difficult to actually achieve. And measuring it is even more difficult. And measuring the impact of it is more difficult. So, of interest to you all, and I'm sure many of you have a copy of this under your pillows at home, is Scotland's National Performance Framework. We produced it first in 2007, and the first iteration, is this being recorded? Was done behind closed doors by half a dozen men in a smoke-filled room. I am slightly exaggerating, but not by much. It was a really sensible set of outcomes, and it came about because we had two successive coalition governments. The UK government has established the Scottish Parliament and designed it so it would always be a coalition. That worked, at least twice. And by the end of those two coalitions, the programme for government was so big we couldn't deal with it. And the government at the time, the new SNP government and the Permanent Secretary and the Civil Service got together and said, look, we really need another answer. We need to be able to recognise the benefit of the work we're doing. So they looked around the world at Virginia and in places in Australia who were beginning to work in an outcomes-based way. So the outcomes are those that we want the people of Scotland to recognise, not that they are, this is our set of targets. I'll come back to it. And you can see the First Minister signed up to the refreshed version in 2018. The refreshed version was done with the public, and Carnegie Organisation held a significant number of round tables so we could take the temperature of the population and understand what they saw was most important. What are the priorities for us? One of the things we did in open government is to identify that we shouldn't go it alone. So it's really important that our National Performance Framework is aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals. Why would you invent something new? There's some very, very clever thinking gone into Sustainable Development Goals. Nicola Sturgeon, our First Minister, was one of the first political leaders to say, look, we've got poverty in Scotland, we know that, we will sign up to the SDGs. So aligning the two made absolute sense. So what if you get no other message out of today is don't make up a whole load of new indicators, align to what exists and get the focus into the ways you're delivering, making sure that you have a culture and a way of working that ensures that happens. Sorry, I'll just go back very quickly. The other thing that we did is to develop a single purpose. We've almost got rid of the growth word. It is really very difficult for governments to stand up and say, it's all right, we'll accept that everybody else is going to go for growth and we won't. It will take a very brave government to stand up and do that. We have absolutely set a purpose which is definitely moving beyond growth. It recognizes that it is much more important that we have a population that's flourishing with increased well-being, not just accepting what we've got, that is sustainable and is inclusive. We are looking after our economy in the best way that we possibly can. The other thing that I'm particularly proud of is the set of values. I think it's really important that we are able to think about the values, both, again, within our own workforce, but values that we want people to associate with us as a government. So we want a society which treats people with kindness, dignity, and compassion, respects the rule of law, and acts in an open and transparent way. And as head of Open Government, it took me ages to get that open bit in. But it's really important, because unless people can see and understand the workings of government, they cannot hold us to account. Governments don't have trust by right. We have to earn trust, and we have to do it in a way that people can see and understand. The MPF has 11 national outcomes, and it has 81 indicators behind it. Sorry, I am trying to move fast. What do we get out of them? It gives us a broad picture of progress. We have outcomes, including that we grow up loved and respected in Scotland. So that's quite difficult to identify the indicators. And for some of our outcomes, we are still developing the indicators, particularly around things like trust. But there is a team that are dedicated to it. One of the Finnish government people said on the stage yesterday she'd never developed an indicator. I wouldn't dare. We have really good analysts to do that. My job is really much more to look at the bigger picture, so I'm not going to pretend to you that I've developed any of these. There is a very effective team who are monitoring on a day-to-day basis. You can check the progress of all of our indicators on Scotland Performs. There's a live link, and it is regularly updated. So how does this link to our economy? As I said, we've almost got rid of the growth word, but not quite. We have a chief economist who is absolutely sold on well-being. And we have a finance minister who is absolutely of the view that we have to deal with our economy in a way that is going to recognize the purpose in our national performance framework and to deliver a well-being economy. So what we're trying to do is align the strategies within government departments to make sure that we are thoughtful and can see your route through to having an economy that is doing that. We have an agenda for the economy. We have an economic strategy, and we are developing that through the National Performance Framework into a well-being economy. It links to the National Performance Framework. The economists have set their own list of things that they are particularly focusing on. They're looking at some of the really big problems that we have in Scotland, like inequality of opportunity, Scotland's sustainable working age population. We have very much an aging population. So all of these things are recognized. We would love more people to come to Scotland. Sadly, we don't control the migration policy in the UK. It's one of the few elements that is not devolved to Scotland. but we recognize that that's an issue for us. So we are very focused on trying to ensure people can have meaningful work. And that we are doing all in our power to provide that. I just wanted quickly to say we are trying to make this real. So when you are setting your indicators today, think about the people who actually have to deliver that and what they have to do. So my colleagues in the Scottish Government are working with 2 or 3 local authorities to test a diagnostic which really looks in detail with the community, in that community, at what the problems are, how they as the population in that area who are our assets can help build a much stronger well-being economy. The diagnostic does benchmarking, and our Office of Statistics is now, under the Open Government Plan, is beginning to publish increasing levels of statistics at local level. So people can understand the issues that they're dealing with at all sorts of levels, national, local, and regional. The diagnostic tries to get to the root of the causes. It is done so in consultation, and it creates priorities. So North Ayrshire is the area that this slide that I pinched from one of my colleagues sets out. This is the benchmarking. They look at the evidence. We don't expect everybody to come with the evidence. We expect the population to come with their lived experience, and that is vital and is evidence. We see the 2 sides of that coin as evidence. We then look at the local conditions, look at the social factors, and the externalities, to try and make sure that whatever developments are in hand are looking properly at the environment as well as the social factors. And this is simply the diagnostic that they came up with in North Ayrshire, looking at the issues around getting increased women into the workforce. So this is the end use of your indicators, is looking at making sure that we have, unless you have identified things that are really meaningful at a local level, then they aren't going to be used. So these elements are represented within the statistics that we take and the progress that we measure. So we need to be able to be conscious of that. Our next sort of phase of it is to look at how the stories of progress are happening and how the National Performance Framework aligns with the Sustainable Development Goals. So we set out a vision. We expect a range of outcomes that are associated with the SDGs, and we're gathering evidence from partners and views so that we can tell a credible and an honest story. Honesty is hugely important. And that we set out intermediate outcomes with partners and that are not just owned by government but are co-owned. I want very quickly to tell you some of the things that we're doing to try and make this all work. So that the National Performance Framework is now in legislation. That is important. It doesn't happen if it isn't in legislation, and our Parliament passed it unanimously. The duty on public authorities to have regard to the national outcomes, they are held to account on that by our audit office. The whole of Scotland and not just the Scottish Government are covered, and as I said, it embeds the SDGs. The other thing that we're doing is trying to create the conditions to make sure that people can be involved in that. And if you like, that's the bit that I'm particularly interested in. I really think that we will not deliver any of this performance unless 2 things happen. One is that we align that performance information with spend. You can count your performance over here all you like, and if it doesn't align with your spend over here, and you're still spending in ways that increase inequality, inequalities, you might as well not waste the money on doing all this counting over here. There is a program of work to think about how we do that in a transparent way. I'm interested in making sure we, through our Community Empowerment Act, we also give the population of Scotland the right to participate in decisions that affect their lives, particularly with local authorities and public bodies. And if they don't feel they have been properly involved, they can take out a participation request. We have legislation about children and young people, and we have an equality duty. So the tools and things that we're doing to do that is we use the data and information we have to make sure people can understand and track the things that we say we are doing. So the National Performance Framework is up there, but the data that sits behind that is increasingly available. We do continue to use written consultations, but we are moving away from that to use service design so that the people who are affected by policies are using design. We do follow an improvement pathway, but increasingly we're using deliberative methods to try and make sure we are hearing the voices of sometimes a random sample of the population, or sometimes mixed groups of stakeholders and end users, but using co-production, participatory budgeting, citizens panels, citizens juries, and we've just started our first citizen assembly. And someone from the UK standing up here saying we are interested in democracy, I know is a bit of a mocking at the moment, but in Scotland, we really do care about democracy, and we do care about improving it. And democracy and trust are absolutely linked. So we have been a member of the Open Government Partnership since 2016, and our two plans have been absolutely about trying to transform how we do government in Scotland, thinking about the ways that we are working so that we're empowering public servants, we're empowering people, and this is a deal between civil society and the state, as you all know, since Finland is also a member. And very good one at that. I just wanted to say something about wellbeing governments. Scotland has joined with a number of other governments, namely New Zealand and Iceland, and that is our First Minister and the Prime Minister of Iceland meeting in Edinburgh recently at a policy lab where we're looking at sharing ideas on how we deliver this stuff. You can have as many indicators as you like, but unless there is political will, unless there is a will through our economy to do it, you will struggle. So you can all read, I think, and I'm very happy to make these slides available, but the wellbeing economy is absolutely looking at what we measure, what our priorities are, how we look at our budget, and try to remove silos. My final point today is somebody said yesterday, don't get up without giving answers. My answers probably aren't very good, but if you're looking for a set of things to do, you could go a long way without finding as good answers in Catherine Trebek's recent book with Jeremy Williams on the economics of arrival. We all need to recognize we live in countries that have arrived. And it's how we frame that message and how we measure progress within that to make sure that we can do it. So We All Internationally is a group of economists based on this sort of Stiglitz model, working together to amplify the important information. We've had evidence for 20 years. It's time to use it. And it's time to really think about it. So the picture is Catherine Trebek, who is a member of WEAL and I'm sure a friend to some of you here. And on the far side is our chief economist, Gary Gillespie, who is working within government really to get this agenda clear and deliverable. So, what are we trying to do overall? Our belief is that we have to do these things collectively. We have to move from fixing and healing and redistributing to preventing harm by getting it right in the first place. And that means really strong representative, economic, and participative democracy. And that's me.
Thank you so much, Doreen. I think this gives quite a lot of inspiration for all of us. What has been easiest? Like, what has been the easiest part of this?
I suppose the first time somebody sat in a smoke-filled room and wrote it themselves. I say that slightly flippantly, but actually it is much easier just to get on and do it. It is much harder to work collaboratively. It really is. And you have to frame what you're doing in a way that makes everybody feel valued, that is genuinely about working together and not 35 people in a room grandstanding. So those skills are really new. And I think we shouldn't ignore any of those.
That's a very, very good point. Collaboration is always useful, needed, and at the same time hard work. Now I would like you to share something again with someone sitting next to you. There are 2 questions for you. What kind of new ideas did you get from this, especially for your teamwork? And what would your working group add to this presentation, or how would you, compare to what you discussed yesterday, what it would be? There are 2 questions open in Screen.io, so use 2 minutes with someone sitting next to you and then document it back, and then we will come back to Doreen and discuss with her a little bit. We will continue the discussion. Thank you for discussion, and please go on documenting if you have your screen IO open and you are just writing or voting. Please do that. But we can continue the discussion with Doreen. Very good questions we have. How can we scale the Scottish performance on a European level? Someone is asking you to solve the question of this whole conference, so please.
I think culture in parts of the EU are very different. So I don't think you can put a blanket, this is what you will do, right across. But I think you can set very strong principles. And I think the importance of having principles that are around human rights really are hugely important. I think it wouldn't be amiss for the all of the EU to think about how all of the high-level strategies are nested so that you can read between them. It is really mad that you would have measuring in one part so that you can't compare with other parts. It's a matter of human nature that people are competitive. So that race to the top actually is quite important, and it's certainly the way open government works. So I don't think we could apply national performance framework, though there are a number of European countries that are doing something similar. It does mean you have to talk to your population. I know Ursula von der Leyen in her new presidency is looking at a process as she set out her new presidency. She set out the requirement for a citizen-led process around looking at priorities over the next 2 years. Let's all use that. Let's find that as a way of building a legacy around how you make sure that EU performance is doing what we want to do.
Then how did you manage possible conflicts between social and environmental aspects of well-being? We know they exist, or do they?
Oh, of course they do. Of course they do. I mean, you know, anyone would be mad to imagine they don't. Human beings will naturally think somebody else is to blame wherever they are. And that innate idea that if you're under pressure, what you do is protect yourself and your immediate environs is quite a problem for big thinking. So what we have is very strong planning laws. We actually have an incredible environmental agency. So our environmental agency has a motto around they won't allow anything that goes beyond one planet. And they work really actively to think about that. But there will always be conflict. There will always be times when people see that human progress is more current, more urgent than the long-term environmental. We have simply to get strong laws, strong lobbies, and people prepared to stand up and make sure that our planning laws are applied.
And when that happens, there is a question about policy coherence. What are the kind of new ways to because we all know that there are these conflicting interests and conflicting policies, and if we get something there, there is always something else there that conflicts and all of that. How to make it coherent?
I don't think there's any single silver bullet or magic answer, but I think a lot of the role of the modern 21st century public servant is really changing. It has long been recognized that you need to think much more broadly, look at the impact. So one of the things that we need to all be thinking about is who benefits. Who benefits from any bit of policy? Who is affected by it? So impact assessments. How do you apply that in ways that aren't just tick box exercises? So that you're thinking about these in the very beginning. Under our open government work in Scotland, we're looking at open policy making and looking at all of the things and the places and the ways you need to bring in, when your decisions need to happen. We're not there yet, so don't ask me for it. But we're actively thinking about, and it's not just the policy cycle, because government does delivery as well.
If we still switch the questions here, thank you very much for that. And there is a very practical question, or not, I don't know if this is practical, but to the point question. Can phase out of fossil fuel extraction be ignored? Fossil fuel extraction is the question, and that's quite a big thing and difficult.
It's a huge thing, and hands up, I live in the country and I still drive a car. I think, first of all, Scotland has now lost all its coal power stations. We are officially the windiest country in Europe, so we are using that. And for much of the year, we do live on renewable energy. And indeed, our renewable energy is what gives the UK its ability to say they are doing good stuff. But it is really difficult, particularly where you have rural environments. So we have really big rural hinterlands, much as Finland has. So we need to be really thoughtful about how we develop public transport, how we think about making sharing, and we have to look at the incentives. We aren't there yet, but we have to look at taxes and incentives to make sure that we are really thinking about it. I suppose if one message about this might get through, it's about looking at solutions and not just whinging. So really identifying both at a national scale but also at a local scale what those are. So we're about to do a citizen assembly on climate change. These have to be not just one-offs. I would like to see populations around the country genuinely thinking about what the trade-offs are. Because unless people understand those things, then there's no reason why it should be their priority.
And this is actually quite crucial. If you take a look at the list of 10 biggest corporations globally, 8 from those 10 are making their money out of fossil fuels still.
Yeah.
So it's really like big question of big corporations and their strategies in the future.
And building, the building industry. We all need houses, but actually unless we put incentives into the market to make sure that they are energy efficient, that they're minimizing their impact, without those bits of regulation and legislation, it won't happen. If we leave that to the market, it won't happen.
Probably to conclude this part, well-being economy is much more positive and easier to understand than degrowth. This might be the biggest takeaway from this discussion. On top of that, there are quite a lot of good notes for your work this morning. Without political will, nothing can be achieved. Even in progressive societies. So somehow that's what needs to be built. Link of nature's ecosystems to national performance frameworks to SDGs. So there has to be this whole palette. How does the private sector relate with this new framework that we discussed a little bit already, and how this contributes into EU policies? Well-being economy is not degrowth. We want Finland in the well-being economy alliance, and that's probably our message then to Raimo Luoma this afternoon as well. So very good points and very good inputs into your discussion in the in teams after this. Very warm thank you to Doreen and warm applause. Okay, then we have a look at what we are about to do today after this. So we go on until 10:15, so for half an hour. Then you go to working groups, and we all go. Then we have lunch in the same place as yesterday. Then we go on with the working groups. But by lunch, you need to have your recommendations from the working groups. And then after lunch, you are able to use your time to have a look at what are the other next steps on that plan. Then we have a coffee break from 2:30 to 3, and it's very important that you then go to your poster. If you have a poster, take your coffee cup and go there. And if you don't have a poster, please go to have a look at those posters and participate to the art mandala. It's in 3rd floor of this building where you can find all of that. And then we come back. We meet in this room again at 3 o'clock. And then we have this big moment that we give those recommendations to Finnish government. And then we have panel discussion on what these beyond GDP indicators are for EU. And I think there we then should conclude all the discussions we have had today. And then by 5 o'clock, we have had also drinks. So that's our plan for today. But now we take a look at how we are with the recommendations and plans. Where are we with conclusions and recommendations? There is something that has been drafted. And now I'm a little bit lost with where we are. We are here. I'm very happy to invite Rilli Lappalainen and Sally to come here from the recommendations team. And I would like to hear a bit where we are, what is needed next, what has been done and what is still missing. Rilli, you have some slides and there is a button there. So please, what happened yesterday, where we are with recommendations, and then also what should be done next?
Thank you, Tuuli, and good morning, everyone. And thanks a lot for your great work yesterday. We were witnessing all the working groups, and definitely there's a lot of serious discussions going on, which is really, really positive thing. A lot of discussions, a lot of points as well, which we all know that it sometimes can create a little bit panic, not panic, but some kind of frustrations on there, and that's good, because I think that's part of the process. So it's absolutely neutral and relevant to have this feeling that we are just now in the middle of the process, because definitely that is on purpose planned on that way, that you are just starting the discussions and hopefully take a little bit of reflections during the night, and then today we are really inviting you really focus on that, what exactly will be the outcomes, which we definitely have the deadline today at 3 o'clock when we are delivering about these recommendations to the Finnish government. So this is your chance now to make the revolution in your working groups, so use that time. And exactly how we do that with Sally now is that I'm just giving you a little bit some kind of general recommendations, what we have observed about yesterday, and then Sally will, on behalf of our group, just to introduce the draft general recommendations for you, because we also want that you reflect of those, because this is part of this whole document, that there are some general recommendations where we are hopefully we'll have your feedback on that. But let's come that in a minute. I will just point a couple of issues what we witnessed during this. So exactly there is still some kind of request from our side that please try to co-create your common messages. There are some of the groups who has got very, very exciting presentations and all the good news and a lot of new knowledge and information coming. But now exactly we are really encouraging you to find the common ideas, what you would like to see as general recommendations coming, and what we believe that is relevant for the EU, especially for the EU context, that what you are imagining, not just stuck on this Finnish presidency, which is over in 2 months, but just to see a little bit longer term. It's absolutely great if you can identify the processes where Finland still can feed in, but keep in mind that it's over and there are Croatian presidency and the next ones to come. So that's keeping a little bit longer term perspective on that when you are doing the recommendations. Then I think we are really good on making statements. We are not so good in making the recommendations, so this is kind of request for you to try to formulate the wording a little bit on that it's really like the recommendations. So really asking what we want and how exactly even better, how you do that. So trying to really get that a little bit more precise on that. We are very good in making the statement, but I think we can do that on the other arenas. But now we definitely need to get the clear recommendations on that. And there's a lot of already good written material what the rapporteurs has collected in our Google document. Please keep it, because that's exactly part of the story when you are doing your next steps. So you don't need to put all your brand ideas to this recommendation, but it's really relevant also for the next steps. And the last session, like Tuuli mentioned, the last session today, after the lunch for you is to really think about what you do with these recommendations and these points, what you have reported. So making your own plan in that topic area, so that it's up to you to decide in which forums you want to go, which are the political processes where you want to feed in. So it's your free time and on that to really make some kind of proper plan on that. And hopefully commit yourself as well to working on that. But now exactly just coming back on the point that what we definitely need is that we have maximum free concrete recommendations, thinking about what is the change, what we want, and how we can do that. So that's our main point for you. But perhaps, Sally, you would like to go through about these, what we have, these general recommendations.
Oh, okay, thanks. Thank you. I'm Sally Nicholson. I've been part of the task force team as well yesterday evening. So we've come up with the beginning of this declaration that we intend to present this afternoon. The important thing to note is that we took this really from the discussions that were held yesterday during plenary and other things that were picked up during our participation in the working groups. So this is really not, this is just a sort of the beginning stab at something which is aiming to show what we have been discussing and what our critical issues are to present to the presidency this afternoon. The meat of the document is still to come, because the meat of the document is the specific recommendations from your 5 working groups. So this bit is still missing. So what we have is a kind of umbrella statement, more sort of general call to action, critical time, get on with it now, be political leaders, show political will, deliver on your commitments for well-being already articulated in the Treaty for the European Union. Excuse me. So we would like you to, we don't want to stand and wordsmith this document now. I'll run through the 5 key sort of general recommendations that we've made in a minute. We don't want to wordsmith this document in this big group, but this document has been sent to all of the moderators, facilitators, the working groups, and we'll be very happy to hear your comments, your suggestions on this beginning architecture for the declaration. The recommendations, the general recommendations, but we don't want to have a lot of time spent with individual word changes. If you have very strong, specific, useful recommendations, please provide them, but please provide the text, not just general comments, because otherwise it's just impossible to work with. Thank you. So we've started off by pointing out the current situation, why it's critical we act now, the fact that clearly GDP is not responding to the needs to deliver or show progress on SDGs, on societal well-being, on environmental sustainability, on ecosystem resilience. There is a need. The EU has already been working, please next slide, has been working for a while on looking at beyond GDP. We want to now make sure that they actually move forward and do something with it. We feel that currently it's very limited ambition, or has been very limited ambition, to actually move beyond this beyond GDP project that has been around for a decade or more. Next slide. So again, the urgency of the moment, a big opportunity we can seize with this idea of a European Green Deal, which is still probably quite vague, and we've already heard that there's promises to have lots of participatory consultation to see what should be in this Green Deal. So now is the time to really seize this opportunity. And we feel that the Green Deal provides the seeds to deliver the change that we need for Europe and for Europe's role. Mustn't forget Europe's role in the global stage, and Europe's role in terms of its impact on sustainable development in other countries. So then we came up with 5 general recommendations, which we took from the discussions yesterday, which we took from the background discussion papers that have been provided for the working groups. So the first one we came up with is about the fact that there will be this European Green Deal, and we feel that it can't be measured through a simple indicator such as GDP, which is no longer fit for purpose. And that that recommendation then came very specifically from one of the working groups, that the EU should replace the Stability and Growth Pact with the Sustainability and Wellbeing Pact, accompanied with a dashboard of key indicators. We didn't mention the semester specifically here because we know that several of the working groups have come up with recommendations for the semester, and we'd like to put that into the more specific recommendations later on. Next one, please. Sustainability impact assessments came up in several working groups. We have an opportunity to expand on that a bit if people come up with specific wording about how they want impact assessments to be improved or used in the future in order to help deliver on this transition, this critical transition. The third one is about participation on the regional and the local level. Bearing in mind that it's not necessarily equal to representation of the whole of society, and the importance of hearing many different voices and their particular concerns about what they understand, what they need from a well-being economy. And next one, please. Yes, so this is the political will idea. We discussed political will a lot between us last night. It's political will to do what? Whose political will can be used in a good way or in a bad way, in fact, as I know myself from my current British living. Decision makers in the EU should take leadership in developing and establishing integrated policies. We put integrated because we recognise that the whole excitement of the SDGs is that it's an integrated agenda, and you have the real opportunity to look at developing policies that can tackle many different challenges and issues at the same time, and could actually have negative trade-offs if we're not careful, but also can have very important and useful, beneficial, synergistic outcomes. And then the last one that we made, the general recommendation, is about the vertical coordination between the different levels. So this came up strongly yesterday in one of the plenary discussions and presentations, that it's really important to have some harmonization across the different levels so we can actually see if we're measuring the same kind of things in the same kind of way, and we are making progress as foreseen. So that was it. Nothing, no rocket science, nothing amazingly new there. But we hope that this will then be followed by your very specific recommendations coming out of the working groups that you're about to go back into. In the meantime, as I said, we would welcome any comments on these general recommendations. We don't want to have a long list of them. If you've got another one you think really important is missing, that's not going to come up in the specifics, then please tell us. If you want to argue with any of those recommendations, great, let us know, but please make more textual recommendations, not just criticism, because it's much more useful, obviously, if we can have something solid that we can put straight into the document. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Sally Nicholson and Rilli Lappalainen. They have quite a work also ahead of them. Is there any special comment or question dealing with this? Yes.
It just has struck me that the document that the Finnish presidency got agreed last week by the subcommittee of the Council is so powerful that we should be recommending that some of this wording that is in the first two paragraphs is so powerful, where it says the economy of well-being is a policy orientation and government approach which aims to put people and their well-being at the center of policy and decision-making. This is such a strong statement that I think if we could sort of build on some actual wording that is already there, that we want to see coming from the Council of Ministers itself, and people's well-being is a principal aim of the European Union.
Very good point. We take that into account, don't we? And then we have another here, please.
Okay, thank you.
And tell us who you are. Sorry, I didn't.
Yes, I would like to say that. I'm Leila Reinout, SDG Watch Europe. So maybe not so surprising that I have this question or comment. I'm reading the text on the computer because I was one of the co-chairs. But I'm quite surprised that there is no language, any reference to the 2030 agenda and the SDGs. I mean, even if it's not perfect, I know that. But I think we do have a set of indicators already within that agenda, so no need to develop a new one, because that will cost us another 5 years. So I really think that we have to use that and not have a kind of document that we invented today, the beyond growth concept. I mean, that's already existing, which is in text for more than decades.
There is nodding in here, and now I see a lot of new ideas coming up. So I'm happy to give 2 speeches, first one there and second one here, and that's all we can take, and then the rest will, the rest can come to Rilli and Sally.
If I can just respond directly to that point first. Leda, thank you. I actually agree with you, and I wanted to put in some SDG wording in the thematic working group yesterday, but there wasn't a complete consensus about the use of the SDG framework in Agenda 2030 in our working group, so I was hesitant to put this in the overarching document. If there is consensus in the room on this, then of course we can put it in, but there certainly wasn't from what I picked up yesterday.
And then we have 2 questions or comments, please.
Yes, my name is Alexandra Köves. I'm a degrowth researcher in Budapest. And I understand that the Scottish government is not willing to put degrowth in its concept, but why don't we? This is a beyond growth co-creation. So I would like to see something in the first general comment. I think it can be put in there, transcending the growth paradigm. I think we need to put that in.
That's
ensuring
then in
sustainability and transcending the growth paradigm. And SDGs actually include economic growth. So I think we have to be careful with putting SDGs in if we want to transcend the growth paradigm.
There are several good points, and then this is in the hands of task force. We take the last comment from here, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Patrick Tembrink of the EEB. In your opening, you talked about us being near tipping points for global ecosystems, but we also saw throughout yesterday the importance of the local, the regional, and national. And if you look at tipping points, we've actually gone beyond tipping points at many local, regional, and national levels. So the question is, if we really want engagement, should we nuance the picture and not just have we are near global tipping points, but actually recognize the fact that we've actually crossed a lot of them locally and national, that would also then allow people to engage on the local, national as well.
Thank you very much. I think all of these were good points, and now we just need to, would you like really just to comment something?
Yes, thank you. That's perhaps my main comment so far. I think that we will cook with this. Let's see what's coming out of the soup or not there. But I definitely, if there's any other of you would like to make the comment, please just come and queue to Sally and myself immediately after this session.
So thank you very much. Let's give warm applause for the task force and their hard work with this. This is the 4 a.m. time at the bar. No, it's just telling us that we should be moving towards the working groups. Remember that, first of all, we had the guidelines here. I know some of the working groups have quite a lot of, quite tight schedule. If you still have a speech in the working group today, please try to help the facilitator and chair and keep your message short and focused so there is enough time for discussion, because that's what we need now in the working groups. And remember to give, listen loud and give everyone to speak in the group. That's the way we get the co-creation running there. Otherwise, here is where we are. By 1:45, you need to have these 1 to 3 policy recommendations. Oh, sorry, 1:45. You need to have these policy recommendations, and by 2:30, main issues discussed and emerging conclusions, documented issues for further discussion, and next steps after the conference, plans for action and cooperation. So that's what is needed. And then when it's 2:30, please have a look at the art mandala that will be finalized then at the coffee break, and the posters are there both for lunch break and coffee break. Go to have a look at, and make sure you are here at 3 p.m. because then we finalize the whole thing, and then we see where we are with our recommendations, what we really are recommending for the EU, and then we discuss a little bit of that, and then in the end have some drinks. That's the plan for today. Thank you very much, and let's go for the working groups.